This is a rough breakdown of the 3-5-2 formation. Also, one of its variants known as the 3-1-4-2 formation. First, we'll go over each individual position and some of their responsibilities in general before we go to how these pieces would operate together in the overall picture. We'll start defensively. You have the center back or sweeper, is typically he would be called in a formation like this. You've got your left and right backs. Some people might play these flat and just call them 3 center backs. However, the way you will play it, you use a sweeper and a left and right back. Here we have the center triangle. You could call this position the stopper, or you could call this position just a defensive mid. Here we've got your left center mid and your right center mid. They are clearly part of this triangle, trying to control and orchestrate things going on in the game. Some people will call this player here a wing back or a winger. For our purposes, we're really not playing them as a traditional winger, so I call them outside mids. So this is a left mid or a left outside mid, not to be confused with a left center mid. I always use center to describe these guys that are part of the triangle. Here, really needing not too much introduction, are the 2 strikers, and they do a lot more than strike for this formation to work. They will have to be involved in the defense, they'll have to be involved in holding the ball, and we'll get to that in a moment. So in general, we've got the 3-1-4-2 formation. Sweeper, left and right back, stopper, center mids, outside mids, strikers. And let's not forget the goalie, because the goalie is the start of every defense. It's great if your goalie can take these kicks out of the box, but these 3 guys and the stopper really need to be aware in moments where we might start to get outnumbered, to keep in mind that the goalie is a great passing option. So, the sweeper. You know, what do we know about the sweeper? We know that we don't want the sweeper to be over here in the corner. We really don't want the sweeper to go into these outlying areas. That's not his job. In fact, when the other team pushes men up, you know, defensively, we'd like whoever the nearest, it doesn't have to be the stopper, because when the ball switches play, if the yellow team suddenly has the ball, and it just so happens the stopper was the nearest man to try and maybe win this ball back, put some pressure on the ball, and again, just so it's clear, the yellow has the ball. If the stopper went to do that, clearly we have a problem here. And we know, in our perfect situation, that we would keep the sweeper free. In other words, he's always that last line of defense. And so, these two center mids, whoever was in the best position, so if these guys are both going to apply pressure, and maybe the left center mid has already figured out that yellow guy's got some pretty fancy footwork. This guy knows, hey, I'm the nearest guy. That needs to be my man. So as soon as he sees those two guys going to doubly apply pressure to win this ball back, he knows that the sweeper needs to be free. And that's why every man on the team needs to know the other guy's positions, because now if he breaks through, they fail here, he gets a little pass in. These two guys have a little bit of a foot fight. The sweeper's constantly positioned himself. These guys have stayed on their marks. And now the sweeper does potentially what the sweeper can do best, and that is, depending on where other guys are, clear it over their heads and create an immediate counterattack opportunity. These guys have pushed a lot of numbers forward, and if we support the sweeper and leave him free to do his thing, he can really help create that counterattack. Sure, these guys could be any number of places. He might do a beautiful pass given the situation, okay, but when you're under this type of pressure, typically you're going to go over the top, find a guy, maybe he switches play again, etc. But he's not going to have that luxury to create the counterattack if that center mid didn't see what was happening in this initial situation, didn't see that they had a guy free in the middle, or, you know, it could have been maybe the left back came over and he saw, and we're doing that. Just a different guy to mark. Left and right guy, left and right back, they've seen what they need to do. We're applying double pressure to try and win this ball back. Clearly hoping the yellow guy makes a mistake, and he could do a lot of things here, but it doesn't change the fact. Let's say the play had just been here. Okay. Then in this instance, our outside mid, if our outside mid had happened to be closest, he needs to solve the problem, because again, we can't have free guys here, but the sweeper, we'd like him not to have to count. We'd like to keep him free to, if the ball moves over here, he's going to move over, he's going to again try and support. It's not ordinarily going to be this exaggerated, because we'd never get an offsides call. It's going to be a little closer. I'm just exaggerating it a little more for the purposes of the video. So, we've explored a little bit of the sweeper's abilities, you know, and again, let's just make sure we don't want the sweeper in the corners ever. In fact, we really don't want the sweeper to go outside of the box widthwise, and really the sweeper is never going to leave this centralized area but barely beyond the half. We have other guys that can go up. We want that sweeper to stay fresh. Again, he's that last line of defense before the goalie. We'd like him to be the freshest guy on the field other than the goalie. Now, the only way 3 in the back really works is you have to have the personalities of the left and right back. They have to be fast players. They cannot be so paranoid of going to the side that they stay tight, because the biggest weakness in the formation is these areas, and a smart coach is going to figure out we're willing to give up these areas a little bit. So when the ball gets played out here, in this instance, the right back has to be willing, no problem. He's a fast guy to go out to these areas and challenge for that ball. Sweeper would slide over. Left back is not going to abandon the middle. He'll hold in our style. So here we've got a yellow guy pressuring the ball, and we've got one of our fast right back and left back. We've got a right back fighting for the ball. Push some more yellows up clearly. Got some yellow guys in this situation. In this instance, our stopper has slid in to try and keep the sweeper free. Left back would delay is in this situation. Again, you might have the outer mid in a 2 versus 1 situation. I want to keep going to 2 versus 1 situations when we can put that type of pressure on the ball. We're going to press relentlessly. That's this style of counter-attacking play. So in this instance, perhaps we win the ball back. He's got some nice passing through options that he can go to pass that ball out. Again, though, this system will not work if your backs, left or right back, are not willing to run out to those wide areas. Now, left and right back, as far as attacking, have a little more leeway. If we had an attacking line up here and we're pushed up, much more likely, if let's say we were attacking them, and up the, much more likely that if this guy gets a ball and can go, that's fine. The right or left back can go and take that ball up right through a hole. However, if they did decide to take that ball up through a hole, hopefully the stopper would fill in, because that stopper is really there to fill in for whoever he would need to fill in for if that happens. Also, it doesn't have to be the stopper, because depending on what's going on with our center triangle, it could easily be a center mid, an outer mid, but we do want to hold our shape when we're pushing up. And the one thing this formation really does is we're constantly trying to control the middle. So again, the left and right back could take a turn going up, but when we're only playing 3 in the back, unlike when you're playing 4 in the back and sometimes someone doesn't come back to cover for that 4th guy, when you're playing 3 in the back, you better yell switch. You better have the nearest possible man that's not involved in the play fill in for that spot. So if you don't know who the left and right backs are and you're in midfield, or even if you're the striker, then our formation could fail. So you need to know. One last thing to mention on the left and right back. It's just really not in their interest, unless all else has failed, for them to cross the middle. They're going to hold ground. The stopper or one of the 2 center midfielders or an outside mid, they're going to fill in that hole on men. They're going to come back. We want to hold our shape on the defense. The more organized the defense can stay, the more likely everyone else will get their counter-attacking opportunities and get the ball back. So the midfield's got to do the work to man mark any additional men to make sure that we can hold the defense together. Now, here you're going to notice we've got the stopper, our deep line midfielder, with the two center midfielders. And you'll see some arrows there, and the arrows are really just there to remind you, hey, this is the center of the field. Typically the most chaos, the most touches, the most creativity can all come from the center line areas of the field. When you look at this formation, when you've got a center back whose responsibilities are clear, you've got a stopper, all our power is up the middle, but we want to remember that you can rotate. Stuff's going to happen there. In that triangle, those three players in particular must be aware at all times of changing positions, which is why typically those two center mids are going to be more likely to be playing a stopper man marking role than, say, the outside guys. That doesn't mean the outside guys won't be doing it, because they will. But thing to remember about the stopper in this system, he's there, you know, it really is a designated defensive man that always knows he can go up. But this system doesn't work if the stopper is going side to side the entire time, you know, kind of like the sweeper. He's really going to stay in the lines of the goal box. So, you know, it just doesn't work for the stopper to be on this side and that side. He's going to pretty much, you know, he can come all the way back into the box, and typically stopper's going to play up to their box. There might be some occasions where he'd need to go into the box. Clearly there will be, but, you know, for him, knowing what areas of the field he needs to dominate and be available, he's a centralized figure. He's going to stay centrally located. You know, as far as the triangle working out, it's going to work out only if these three individuals have chemistry and will talk. If the triangle doesn't talk, that could be another big failure of this system. A lot of everything is going to be created with that triangle. That's true of a lot of other formations that have a central triangle. The teams that play the 4-3-3, clearly they have a central triangle as well. If you want the easiest one, you're probably going to encounter is a 4-3-3. So, again, this stopper, you know, really his role is left back gets sucked out wide. Sweeper's holding his ground. He moves, he's on a man. Stopper comes back. You know, we've got a yellow guy here, a yellow guy here. His idea is just, you know, he's there to help keep this guy free sooner. Let's keep our shape. This guy did not leave the middle. And I may be a bit redundant, but it needs to happen. So, now, what do we need to know about these two guys in the middle, our center mids? Actually, I've gotten slightly ahead of myself. The stopper, our defensive mid, a lot of guys would take the most athletic player they could find and play him in that type of position. The other side is you might want to take since it is part of that central triangle, just depending on what types of guys you've got. You could clearly, if you've got a really creative player there that's at least fairly athletic, could be great for creating plays. The stopper defensive mid has to fill in the holes on defense, but he's also first in line to get a lot of balls that come out of the foot fights and create and set up plays. So clearly, if he's a vocal guy, that's a benefit as well. Now moving on to the two center mids. They could conceivably end up anywhere on the pitch, but let's just take our right center mid. Odds are, if we're going to be in the opposing left corner of the field, would it really make any sense for the right mid to be there? I mean, in all likelihood, either striker should be more likely to be in that corner, or the left mid, or in this case, you know, the outside mid, wing back, whatever guys want to call him. So you've got, you know, 4 guys that are more likely to end up in that corner all day long. But I mean, really, these two players have to be quite smart as well, don't they? Because any way that this play shifts, they're going to be involved. If they're not involved, again, the system could break down. If you've got a guy that always wants to hang wide, or a guy that always holds the middle, doesn't really want to go anywhere in these outline areas, he'll leave a hole. Or if the other side is true, you know, where he likes to, he gets pulled outside and he just hangs in and never comes back again, you could have a hole, and maybe the stopper would rotate some and he'd see that that hole was left there and we could go, and again, you know, it's a triangle. But that would be, you know, clearly when you hear, let's get our shape back, this guy has to understand what the shape really is. And again, they really have to understand their ability to switch. Clearly, if this guy's come back and there's been a big foot fight in the corner, etc., and we're down here and he gets the ball, and there's a lot of guys here, I mean, he might just go ahead and go right on down the side as far as he could. But again, eventually he's got to get his shape back, and we need to know who each other are for this system to work. Now if we want to talk about the outside mids, and in our version of this system we're clearly not playing them as a classic wingman, because a classic wingman sometimes might play super wide, and they are going to give up this space, and we're looking to get these big runs down the wing, but that's not the style of the 3-1-4-2, 3-5-2 that we're really looking for. We're looking for maximum coverage to win the ball in the middle part of the field. So the job of the outside mids, they've got quite a job. They run end to end. So, you know, we can go, you know, one of the two guys that makes sense to be fighting for a ball in the corner is going to be your outside mid. Sometimes it'll be a center mid that ends up here in the corner, but more often than not, we've got one of the left or right backs and their outside mid they make sense to be in these corners because it allows us to stay organized and hold our shape. Clearly that's going to get broken down, but all the way the opposite is true. All the way on the attack, we could be end to end, and in that instance this guy clearly has to be in shape. He has to be aware more than any other player, whether they're playing a 4-4-2, a 4-3-3, etc. He is going to be up against, probably more often than not, the same guy all game. And he's going to need to sum up if that guy's slightly faster than him, has slightly better foot skills. He's going to need to sum up this guy he's against a lot early on in the game if he wants to have success and use his traits that will fare well against the type of style he's playing. So really needs to be aware, and sometimes you could go the whole game just in foot fights. 75% of your foot fights could be with that same guy. But this guy's not just a stagnant character. He's not just out here purely on the edge, because that's not the style. Again, we want him to have the ability, if the ball's over here, we're going to go ahead. He will not cross the middle unless there is a really good reason to break formation. But what could happen is he's going to go ahead. He might hold the middle, and in that instance we have a lot of players in a small amount of area. Should they try and switch the ball over to the opposite side of the field and get it over everybody, we still, as that ball's going, he's got some time to move. Right back hasn't abandoned position. We've got time, we've got numbers, as long as we stay organized. Now, if we're really pressuring the ball, hopefully they're not going to get that long ball switch off too often. More often than not, we will win that ball back at some point with superior numbers in the middle of the field. So this style really is all about counterattacking and superior numbers in the middle of the field. But this guy, again, this outside wing back, when we get stuck in defensive situations, he's basically playing half the field. He's playing the whole right side of the field, potentially, at any given moment, because he's got to shift to keep us compact and to try and keep our superior numbers. And that's fine if over the top sometimes they find our open areas. We just need to know what our open areas are. So I move the pieces around. Our formation in this example is clearly under an attack. You could kind of guess they're playing 4 in the back. Doesn't matter what the rest of their formation is, but the point here is, what are the strikers doing and why in this formation defensively? And that is, there's no offsides until you get across the half. So while basically they pushed a ton of numbers up against us, we're trying to stay organized, we're compact, all the midfielders are pretty busy. Yeah, if you look to the attacking left side of the pitch, there's a yellow defender that's maybe hoping for some switch to come in and pull off an attack while everybody's shifted over to one side. But our striker that you see there defensively, he's done what he needs to do, and that is go ahead, come back, fill in that hole a little bit, so that we're not so far away from the ball. We're under that kind of pressure unless that sweeper manages to get a big kick out or someone happens to win it and get the perfect pass, he strategically, he's come down, he's filled in that space. That said, we've still left one striker who's holding the half, and he's moving side to side. He would not allow himself to be marked. In this example, you'll notice I pulled their goalie out of the box, so perhaps this is late in the game. Their goalies come out somewhat, etc. They're looking for a point, maybe desperately, doesn't really matter. But the thing here is, there's purely they're being very attack minded, and if we counterattack from this position, let's say that ball pops to the open striker and he manages to quickly, he's going to automatically know he's got a striker available, and he manages to quickly get it over the top. This guy in all likelihood could just chip it over the keeper. Keeper is well out of his box, and this is a common tactic when you're trying to desperately push up on a team towards the end. That play comes off a lot better because the strikers are organized. I mean, it could be a situation, anything could have happened where the ball started to shift, etc. One striker was still coming back. The strikers can switch. It doesn't have to be, that doesn't have to be the left striker, the right striker. It's always possible that they switched. Do I need the striker? Or does any team really want the striker if we're still holding this formation and haven't switched formations for some reason? To really come any further into the play than that? Not really, because otherwise it just allows them to keep pushing up on you. And you want this guy, again, right on that line, side to side, staying available. If they're in the attacking corner, does it matter at all where your strikers go? Can they switch places? Of course they can. Either of those strikers could be anywhere on the attacking half of the pitch. Yell and switch. I mean, either of those strikers could be how we were talking about. We don't want a lot of guys in our corners. Clearly those strikers could end up in their corners all day long. Here would be an example. In this example of what could happen attacking wise with strikers, we don't even know, and it doesn't necessarily matter how it happened, but we have one striker in their far corner. We have another striker that has tried to stay within about 40 feet of the other striker at all times. He stayed connected with his striker, and whether we were in the position we showed before, etc., we like to keep those strikers connected, and they're really paired up. If the two strikers can't connect well, definitely a play like this, the situation we find us in that I've just created, much less likely to happen. So here, you might notice we went a little nuts defensively, and they've left probably, like, we have one striker who's, let's ignore what he's doing, it doesn't make sense, but our striker has the ball and he's got some options. They've got their numbers back. He's under pressure. It looks like he's about to be under a lot of pressure. The yellow team is man marking. So what should our striker do? Well, our striker can do pretty much whatever he sees to do. It may make sense to just run into that space. It may make sense, if he's got the foot to do it, for him to go to that defensive mid he sees. Our stopper he sees just over their heads, and he's hoping that guy will get a quick shot through traffic by switching play. He might even go long Excuse me. He might even go ahead and do the ball long over to here. That might work out for him. But in all likelihood, he might go this way with the ball, hoping to lure some more guys in. This striker might actually run here. If they don't get nailed for offsides, he might do a pass back. At which point, some of these guys may have moved. This guy, because of the movement here when they saw him coming, this guy may have kept sticking to his man. And now all of a sudden, just because the two strikers switched places again, did a pass back, hopefully not getting offsides, all of a sudden here we are at the edge of a box with a shot through traffic, and lo and behold, it's not one of the four main central mid, center, outside mids. It's not one of the strikers. It's the defensive mid, or perhaps a defender who went crazy, and the stopper, defensive mid, yelled switch with him. And here we've got a goalie who was previously pulled. We potentially have, as long as he shoots it in time, we potentially have a nice shot that's developed. None of it will happen if these strikers get isolated. We'd like to not have them isolated. So again, at all times, really they should never be more than 60 feet apart max. That's 20 yards for you guys that like to talk in yards. Really I like to see them 40 feet, no more than 40 feet apart. That's about the right distance for them really to find holes and create problems. Again, you know, when we're on the defense, a striker's not just a striker. He's, you know, think of him as an attacking midfielder, etc. They've got to set up plays. They get stuck in situations where clearly, you know, the strikers here to do the right thing are never going to get a shot. So just forget about striker means striking. Okay? That's the main thing that I think a lot of people just get confused on. A lot of times it's going to be the other guys in the formation that get the actual shots, but who cares if you don't have creative strikers to set up creative passes, creative to know when to do a ball over the top, because it makes sense to do a ball over the top. If you don't have a giving striker, it's hard to work with them. That said, if you have a striker that was in this position, let's say the situation was changed and it just happened the other striker was somewhat separated, which is fine in this case if we have the other numbers doing the fighting. He's not too separated. Let's say it's him that gets the ball over the top. If you have the type of striker that decides to create a play, if he decides to create a play there, clearly that's a one-touch shot to far post. If this guy decides that's a moment to take 3 touches, that's probably a bad idea. So again, I'm getting a little redundant and off course here. But main thing to the system, stay connected. Midfielders, when they see the strikers starting to go up, don't leave one striker, 2 strikers totally isolated. They need to move up. They need support. You'd like to think as they're going up that at least one of the midfielders is automatically at least 40 feet behind them. And then we're working as a team. Excuse me. And it should be mentioned, just to tie in the other players, you'll notice that our outside left mid and center left mid, those 2 green guys you see attacking, they could even be swapped there. In all likelihood, probably the outside guy would be the outside left mid. And he shifted almost the whole way. That's his job. There on the defense we see what would have to be the sweeper, our center back, further back on the outer right edge of the inner circle. And we've got the left back. He has not crossed the middle to the right side of the pitch from an attacking point of view in our example. So they've held their shape, and we've left some space here, but we have all the guys to deal with that space. And this guy even stayed here. He could have ended up potentially with a long ball switch into the box as well, although that would be quite a shot to pull off. So let's not neglect that our left back and our outside left mid have shifted, but they haven't broken the main zonal rules of the way we're learning a 3-1-4-2 or 3-5-2. Now, particularly in our town, you'll have a lot of teams that want to play the style of formation of our professional team, which is the 4-3-3. This formation will be a fail for a lot of teams that are 16 and under, just because of the amount of space that's left. I mean, just look at the three. Now it does, if they can switch the ball across the width of the field, it does keep creating a lot of attacking opportunities for them. But what we need to be aware of, when they're not shifting, etc., the way they play a three is not a flat three, and this triangle could be just easier for me to show you here. You know, some of them might play that type of a triangle as well, a more defensive triangle, but it doesn't change the fact that they're playing three at the top, and they're way more likely to have their guys used to being a holding striker, because those strikers are going to get isolated a lot, and we want to put pressure on them. But you need to be aware that the 4-3-3 lends itself to us getting wide on their side of the box a lot. So whereas our formation tends to give up this area, that formation, if we figure out they're playing a 4-3-3, strikers can have a field day going this way, especially if guys push up. It's really easy to penetrate that area. And with two center backs, anywhere 16 or under, there's more likely to be some confusion about man marking, etc. If they play a 4-3-3 against our system, clearly we can get some shots on them. The opposite said, one of these outlying guys, wingbacks, could have a tougher time, and they're way more likely wingback outside mids. Be aware, these outside defenders typically are going to take turns pushing up on you. So instead of you being up against one guy, you may be up against the same two guys all game in a 4-3-3. In reality, the majority of teams you'll probably play will play some slightly altered version of the 4-4-2 that we see yellow presenting. So where do they have us outnumbered? They have easier connections for sure. They have us outnumbered on the sides. Where do we apply more pressure to break through? We apply more pressure because if you're counting these two rows of three for 6, here you have 5 guys plus our 6th guy, and then these guys are holding it tight. So in theory, we have in this center area 8 guys because of our organizational responsibilities to their 6. So if we stay organized, we can win the ball in the middle. We just have to know that their strength could be pushing up on the sides. We should beat that formation with a 3-5-2 in the center of the field if we have equal player for player. Okay, so we've looked at the most likely formations we'd be up against, but what if we're later in the game, they're applying a lot of pressure? Is it as simple as me just saying, oh, let's go to one striker, hey, striker on the left, go back and be another stopper? You know, what I'm not going to do, I'm not going to put 4 in the back. We need to try and not mess with the organization of the back 3. So we're ahead in the game. I need to add a stopper. I don't want the main stopper to play any differently. We're just adding a defensive mid, a stopper. And so it's going to depend who's there. What personnel do I have? Because in all likelihood, it could be that the stopper I like the best to go with, say, the main guy in that position. His personality traits, he might be this guy. If that happened, now I'm in a situation. We're actually playing a 3-2-4-1. In that instance, this striker will just play, since we've got a guy back, he's never going to come back. He's always going to hold the line, trying to be available for a ball. And so that's a change we would make, but that change would only work if this guy really understands the stopper position. This stopper plays just how he always does and isn't really giving too much thought to the second stopper. This guy understands the role and has the stamina to be an outside mid, a guy that can go end to end, and that this striker remembers, hey, I'm a lone striker. I'm going to hold the ball if he has to. So, you know, in this situation, they fished it back out. It did get to him. It so happens he's got numbers behind him. He's just going to hold that ball up. He's got his back to him. He's going to create a play. But, you know, again, we need to know if we were going to change our number. We don't want to drastically change the formation, you know. So here was a defensive ploy of doing our best to don't disrupt the defense. Don't disrupt our style of midfield. We just added a stopper in this defensive mid, kind of a adding more stomach position, and we're not taking away our explosive capabilities defensively of that one striker. We're not doing that. Now, what if the opposite happens? What if we get in a situation where now we need to add more of a striker role because we're pushing up, trying to come from behind? So as not to mess with our general tactics, etc. If we're in the situation, so there's 10 minutes left in the game, we're pushing for a point, we want to make a tactical change, we can't veer too far from who we are all the time, which is the 3-5-2. So we could make a choice if we think it'll work and just really abandon the position of the defensive mid and play a straight 3-5-2. And in this situation, these guys might go up a little more, and and we might know that the sweeper's breaking the rule a little. Maybe he's leaving a little bit of gaps, or maybe we're getting more into a dangerous scenario of just a flat 3 without so much triangle coverage there. Too much, too little. We could regret pushing up like this, but you know, maybe the easiest thing to do is the 3-5-2. But you know, taking away our defensive end, really just holding our normal formation. However, that probably wouldn't be what we would choose to do if there was 5 minutes left and we really need a point. We're probably going to morph into a 3-4-3. So, in this example, you went from the 3-1-4-2 or 3-5-2, you went to a 3-4-3. Why? Well, we've left our 3 defensive players working exactly how they always do. We've got 4 guys across the middle working exactly how they always do. Only difference is the 2 guys in the middle are clearly aware that they've got another attacker they can find, and by knowing that, they should also be aware that perhaps when we lose the ball, they need to be more defensively minded. A lot of guys love the 3-4-3, and it's a formation you will also play against, but we can't cover everything. So when looking at this, you're thinking, wow, why are the 2 strikers over there? Well, it would depend. When you've got to suddenly change your formation slightly, in this instance, I took our stopper. Let's say that was, in this instance, Will Smith. Let's say we push him up to center right mid because I've got Zach Nichols. So I've got 2 guys that can create some plays. I've left Nichols next to Smith. In this instance, let's say I moved Baric up. Well, I know he's left-footed, and he might make a speedy attack up the left side there. And so it wouldn't necessarily, just because we play 4-3-3, I wouldn't want those 2 strikers to play any differently than they're used to. We're just adding a major attack there. So nothing really much changes for the strikers other than maybe they're holding that position. Okay, so the reason I did it this way is just to show you it easily could be that the strikers just aren't adding up together at all. And it's not a speed issue, it's a sophistication issue. If that was the case, I might go ahead and leave my main central midfielders in. I might take the guy who was playing defensive mid and trying to create stuff from there. I might go ahead and pop him in. This would disrupt the strikers somewhat, but clearly if you go to a 3-4-3 choice like this, we're trying to connect the dots better. We're trying to get players to connect up, and we're putting more towards the attack. I mean, if you want to sit there and imagine triangles, you can't get more triangles than the 3-4-3. It is not our formation, but any of these formations, it's just a number. When things actually happen on the field, they can all shift, etc. So here we are towards the end. And you'll notice that when we did go to a 4-3-3, we didn't try and play some super wide 3 where they're almost a straight up what you'd call a wingman like you see yellow. We kept ours where we're trying to keep our strikers 40 feet, max 60 feet apart. Try to keep our guys connected. That's not our style. That's not what we practice. We're not looking to play the entire width of the field at this time for switches. We're looking to stay compact. So that's really our identity, the 3-1-4-2. There's a lot of scenarios. Again, you know, we're just looking these guys at all times to counterattack, 1 or 2 touch, get the ball. Clearly the stopper, when he has the ball, he can get the ball to any player, and that's pretty much true of the other 2 center mids. Other guys can get a bit more isolated, and they're more likely to have to go over the top to make their switches. Everything starts with this organization, this guy knowing how to help them. The more organized our defense is, the more the strikers know this is my side to fill in, I'm going to be available. The more everybody knows their roles, the better. Everybody should be great, not good, but great at least 2 positions, and decent at all positions. So that concludes what may be a very hard to listen to demonstration of how our team will attempt to be a counter-attacking 3-1-4-2. Thanks.